Roads are, it's a fairly short section here of roads. There's not a lot new. I think you'll find that the roads are pretty much what everyone's doing now. I can't think of anything that would be different other than setbacks from water bodies. So we'll spend a little time on that. So for us, this goes back to the jurisdiction thing. For us to have jurisdiction, the land management road must be primarily for timber harvesting and related activities. If it's a road to someone's camp and there's no timber harvesting involved, it's just a driveway to someone's camp, that's LEPC jurisdiction. It has to be a land management road for us to have jurisdiction. It does not include skid trails. By definition, they've got a difference. If development or other change of use, and I've mentioned this, will follow within 5 years, it's not a land management road. There's that 5-year look back thing. I've seen this countless times where folks have done a timber harvest, known full well that it will be developed into something else, and tried to mask it as a timber harvest to avoid permitting and all kinds of other things. And just be aware of that if development will follow, it has to meet standards for the other agencies or the town, wherever you're working. So this is a difference. Again, like the shading standards, there's a difference here in setbacks between the organized and unorganized towns. So the organized, again, just like what we saw before, above 300 acres, it's a 25-foot setback. 300-acre drainage to 25 square miles, it's a 50-foot setback. And then below 25 square miles, it's a 100-foot setback. So your setbacks get bigger, the bigger the water body. That's organized. In unorganized, there are some exceptions to that. So you basically can go up here, you got 25-foot setback from your small streams, from 300 acres all the way down to 50 square mile drainage. It's a 50-foot setback, increasing with slope. We know what our filter chart looks like. So from 300 acres all the way down to 50 square miles, it's a 50-foot setback. From 50 square miles and below, it's a 100-foot setback. So again, in the rule, there's some exemption or a little more liberal interpretation of what can be done in the unorganized. A little bit of difference here as well. So your smaller wetlands and small water bodies that aren't over 10 acres, still a 25-foot setback. Once you break the 10-acre threshold, it jumps up to a 100-foot setback. So Great Ponds now have a 100, well, will have January 3rd, a 100-foot setback. Under current rule today, you can build a road on flat ground within 25 feet of a Great Pond. Risky, but you can. And this pushes that around a Great Pond, this pushes that back out to 100-foot. Maine Forest Service can cut these numbers in half if you come to us and tell us why you can't meet these setbacks. It doesn't specifically say that there's a permit process or a variance process. It just says you just have to tell the Bureau, which is us, why you can't meet these standards. And if we find that that's your only alternative, we can reduce that to 1/2. So if you came to us and said, I just can't meet this 100-foot setback, and here's why, we would go look at it and grant you a waiver for that. And that's built right in the rule as well. So if you get in a situation that you're pinched by ledge or something going on that you just simply cannot operate under these setbacks, call us and we'll take a look and work with you on it. I know you've all seen this, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Water must be diverted through vegetative filter strips. Nothing has changed here. This is always has been and always will be. Never less than 25 feet. We see this a lot, and I still see it a lot. Ditch termination into water bodies without adequate filter strips. Road ditches cannot terminate directly into streams, wetlands, or water bodies. You have to disperse water through a vegetative filter strip at least 25 feet, and that increases with slope. And we see this again and again and again. The question often comes up with old ditches that, 30, 40 years ago, someone ran the ditch directly into the stream, but now the ditch is revegetated. It's got bushes in it, it's stable, that in itself is not a violation unless you go back and reditch it. So don't touch it. Use that as your vegetative filter strip, but don't touch it. It's okay to cut the bushes, leave the root systems. If you need to do it for safety and visibility, that's fine. But once you take an excavator and start scooping and redirecting that water into the water body, stream or wetland, that's a violation. So by itself, if it exists from a grandfather reason, it's okay, but don't make it worse. And we see this a lot. This is an example of a direct ditch termination. That's a wetland out there, in case you can't see that. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit on water crossings. Most of the road stuff is pretty straightforward. It's filter strips, setbacks. It's not a whole lot different than what you're doing now. Water crossings, the standards are essentially the same. There is a little difference, and we'll get into this of permit by rule. We'll talk about that toward the end. We got a few more slides to go here. So all land management road crossings, including approaches, ditches, and other structures, must be designed so that concentrated water runoff does not enter the water body or tributary stream. And that speaks to those filter strips. You have to turn the water into a filter strip. Sedimentation of surface waters is reasonably avoided. There's no substantial disturbance to the stream bank. Fish passage is not impeded, and water flow is not unreasonably impeded. So this should look familiar because it was the same standards for the skid trails. We've been asked the question, what does reasonably avoided mean? Or what does reasonable measures mean? In the rule, it actually references our BMP guidelines, the BMP book, as reasonable measures. So if we're looking for whether a reasonable attempt was made at controlling water, for example, in a filter strip, that book is referenced as guidance for what is a reasonable measure. This comes up, and this is important. In the unorganized now, in Chapter 27, there's no distinction between permanent versus temporary. For consistency, we've always tried to carry the same interpretation, but there was actually no distinction. Now in Chapter 21, it's spelled out. If a structure is installed longer than 7 months, a crossing is considered permanent. And I can hear it right now. Somewhere out there is saying, yeah, but what if it's frozen in? What if we can't get back there? What if we put it in December and it's now June and I haven't gotten back there yet? I'm going to be in trouble. No. We'll get to that in just a second. If fill is used, the crossing is always considered permanent. And this flops over from DEP. Once you put dirt on a culvert, that culvert is considered permanent, even if it stayed in there a day. Once you put fill in the stream or is below the normal high water line, that structure is considered permanent for our purposes. And permanent skid trail crossings are treated like land management road crossings and must meet sizing requirements. I see this a lot in the organized towns where a contractor will go harvest a block of wood and put skidder panels in, cross over and cut the wood, and the landowner says, that's great. I want you to leave those panels in so I can cross that with my four-wheeler. That can be done. It certainly can be done, but it has to meet sizing requirements. It can't be undersized. At that point, if it will stay in place, it's got to be sized appropriately. There might be some other things that come into play with a permit by rule, and we work through those, but the sizing is really important. It can't be undersized and left in. Temporary crossings may be smaller, but they must be removed and stabilized before freezing conditions or as soon as possible after snowmelt. I understand in northern Maine, especially, you may not even be able to get back in there until July. Between the roads, the conditions, roads may be soft, so on and so forth. You may not be able to. So as soon as possible after snowmelt, you have to get back in there. If it's still in there in October and November from the previous winter, that might be a problem. We have to see a plan. We have to know that something's happening. You're trying to get back there and pull it. But there is a little bit of grace there on that 7 months. This is a little different. Most folks on this call are oversizing culverts above standard anyway, or crossings above standard. I think we all realize we're getting some really, really crazy storm events, rainfall events. And I think I think most of the large landowners have started to upsize things to account for that. Current rule is 10-year flow or 2.5 times. Chapter 21 is a 25-year flow or 3 times cross-sectional area. So that's a little difference between the rules in the sizing. So anything permanent has to meet one of these 2 criteria. Two examples of bad crossings. Perch culvert. It gets worse on the other side. There was a ditch terminus, which I didn't have room enough for the picture, but, and then this one, obviously armoring, just, there's not a lot I need to say there. I think we can all see the problems there. So here's a few more things about land management road water crossings before we jump into permitting. I'm going to talk about maintenance really quickly too. I've got a slide on maintenance and upgrading roads, but let's talk, there's just a few things left on road water crossings. If you plan to use a culvert, it has to be installed at or below stream bed elevation, can't be perched, must be seated on firm ground. Soil must be compacted halfway up the side of the culvert. I have no idea how I would figure that out if I'm not there when you install it. Covered by soil to a minimum depth of 1 foot or manufacturer specs. And then it has to be adequately stabilized, head wall on the inlet end. We typically see riprap there. This is something new in statewide standards. I'll point this out. If the water body being crossed is a perennial stream and has a slope of more than 2%, meaning the stream gradient, a bridge or pipe arch must be used to maintain the natural stream bed. So if you've got a stream gradient of 3 or 4% in a mountainous area, you cannot use a culvert and have the big waterfall at the end. You have to use an open bottom structure of some kind. A couple more slides before we talk about permitting, and the permitting is pretty short as well, so we're almost done. So maintenance and closeout. Like chapter 27, there's a provision in chapter 21 that ditches, culverts, bridges, all of the water control structures must be maintained on a regular basis to ensure effective functioning. Maintenance of the water control structures must continue until the road is discontinued or put to bed and the crossings removed. So like chapter 27, there's an obligation to either maintain existing crossings and water control structures or close the road out and put it to bed. You can't build the road and just forever walk away and let things plug and wash out and do all the things that they do. It has to be maintained. So that's built into chapter 21 as well. This shouldn't be new. This is exactly almost word for word in chapter 27 today. So this comes up a lot, the question of upgrading existing roads and bridges. We understand that there are miles and miles of roads. There are hundreds and hundreds of bridges and crossings that are not up to standard, not up to these standards at least. They're allowed to exist and continue to be maintained as long as you don't make them bigger and as long as you don't make them more non-conforming. So an example would be a road that exists today within the setback. You don't have the appropriate setback to a great pond, for example. You see them all the time. You drive by and say, what a pretty view. I can look out on the lake. This is great. But that road is within the 100 feet from the PGP or the Great Pond. You can maintain that road. You can maintain it within the footprint of what was originally there. You can harvest brush for safety, grade it, all the things that you would normally do to that. But you can't turn a 30-foot road into a 60-foot wide road. If you want to upgrade that road and make it larger, then it would have to comply with all the setback standards. You can maintain what's there, but you can't make it bigger or more non-conforming. The same with the crossing. We know there are culverts and bridges out there that may or may not meet sizing standards. No one's expecting anyone to go rip all those up and put brand new crossings in. If you do take it out to replace it, you have to put it back into the chapter 21 standards. But you're allowed to maintain a crossing if it's non-conforming as long as you don't make it any worse.